Have you ever been sitting at your desk feeling overwhelmed as you try to get some work out by the end of the day? It may be already 3 p.m. but you haven't eaten yet or taken a sip of water, and maybe you've been working like this for months or even years. But what are the physical symptoms that things have gone too far and you might be suffering with chronic stress or even anxiety? Well, in this video, we're going to be going through the physical symptoms you need to look out for. So one of my clients used to talk about how on edge he would be all day at work. He was in a really high pressure environment, and all of a sudden an email might flash up from his boss on his screen asking to see him. So when this happened, his heart would just stop and he'd start sweating, even panicking, as he wondered what might be wrong. He said he couldn't shake this feeling of dread, and even though he'd tell himself to keep it together, things were just getting worse. And this constant worry was stopping him from sleeping as he started to feel really low in energy. He stopped even wanting to see or talk to any of his friends and family, and he started to feel disconnected from everyone around him. And as things got worse, he also started to feel this sense of panic that would creep up on him in everyday situations. It was when he was surrounded by lots of people, like on a train. So to prevent this happening, he started avoiding places which made him feel even more isolated. But overall, and this is something that's consistent with all of my clients suffering with anxiety, they feel that something's holding them back from feeling happy. And my client said that he was worried that if he didn't stay alert, something bad might happen, so it was better to be cautious. Now, this may all sound very familiar to you, and if you've ever suffered with anxiety, you may have had some of the following physical symptoms. Maybe you feel restless, or you've sensed an increased heart rate, maybe sweating, shaking, or you've experienced skin rashes, dizziness, difficulty concentrating or sleep problems, maybe even digestive issues or chest pain. But if you're wondering what the difference is between stress and anxiety, stress is your body's reaction to a trigger and is a temporary situation that passes after a short time. This can be a fight or flight situation, like a car driving towards you or an argument you might have with your spouse. But anxiety, on the other hand, is a sustained mental health issue that can be triggered by stress. But the problem with anxiety is it doesn't just stop once the extreme threat passes. It can remain in your life and rear its head even in non-threatening situations. And this is how anxiety affects the body, because it starts as a negative looping belief that leads to these thoughts, these anxious thoughts, which lead to these feelings. And it can affect your work and your home life really negatively if not managed. So to understand exactly what type of anxiety you might have, I'll go through some of the most common ones now. So the most common is generalized anxiety disorder. And this is a general constant fear or worry, which leads to restlessness with trouble sleeping and even lack of concentration. Social anxiety is a fear of judgment or humiliation in social situations. A phobia is a fear of a specific activity, object or situation, such as speaking in public or fear of spiders, for instance. Hypochondria is the fear of having serious health issues. Obsessive-compulsive disorder, or OCD, is the need to perform certain routines repeatedly or having thoughts repeatedly. And post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, is having severe anxiety after a traumatic event or events. So what's important to note is that all of these have their basis in fear. Fear of what might happen to us or our loved ones, fear of what might happen in the future, or fear of what others are thinking about us. And this is the key to overcoming it, because if we understand what our internal beliefs are that lead to these fearful, anxious thoughts, we can adapt our perception of life and the world around us. So, for instance, in my sessions with clients, the most common beliefs are, I can't cope, or I'm not good enough to deal with this, or I'm not smart enough or strong enough to deal with this, which leads to these feelings of helplessness. And these beliefs are there because of events that happen to us in childhood and sometimes even later on in adulthood. For instance, I had a client who owned his own company, but would become very anxious when having to make money decisions or when managing anything financial, basically on the financial side of the company. And because of this, he had really bad money problems, not just in his business, but also in his home life and in managing his own home as well. So we worked together to understand the root cause of the problem. And when we delved deeper, we discovered that one day, when he was a child, I think he was around 6 years old, at school, he spent his lunch money on a small toy that one of his school friends had sold him. And when his teacher and parents found out about this, they made him stand in front of the entire school to give back the toy and made an example of him in front of everyone. And after he was already humiliated, the teacher and parents shouted at him and told him not to be so careless with money, and that obviously he was too stupid to even know how to handle money. So ever since then, without him even realizing it, he developed this belief that he was terrible with money. And he then took this belief well into his life and into his 50s. So this is just one example, but it's so common with people struggling with anxiety. Often they will have been in some kind of event that has led them to believe that there is something wrong with them. And this belief that there is something wrong with them leads to constant negative self-talk, which can then soon feel like life is spiraling out of control when small challenges become these huge challenges. But the amazing thing about this is that as our beliefs create these anxious thoughts and feelings and then physical symptoms, we can turn things around. And this is by installing positive and healthy beliefs about ourselves. And so by managing our internal dialogue and changing our beliefs to positive ones, we can improve our coping mechanisms so that when we find ourselves in a challenging situation, our positive beliefs and coping mechanisms kick in automatically, helping us deal with the challenge rather than automatically responding in fear and avoiding a situation or having these physical symptoms such as sweating or panicking. So, for instance, with my client who had money anxiety, we swapped out his looping belief that was, I'm terrible with money, and we actually trained his mind by building up his self-esteem and removing that self-criticism that he had of himself so that he felt competent, intelligent, and strong enough to handle any money decision that was thrown at him. And this really worked for him because where he was feeling desperate and anxious before, he is now a happy, confident and successful man, and this practice really helped him in his life. But you have to remember and to think of this like as if you're training a muscle. You need to train your brain over time. So doing something positive can't be done for a day thinking that it will make everything better. It takes effort and training over time so that it becomes a habit. And with that habit, it becomes your lifestyle and your personality to think this way. And once we build up our internal coping mechanisms, you then have the internal power to overcome anything that comes up. Because we cannot change or control anything that happens to us, but we can control our reaction to it. So by developing these strong coping mechanisms, we can learn how to handle the pressures of life in a healthier way. And demands of a job or having a company are really real, and it can be very tough at times. But with the right training, we can learn how to develop coping mechanisms to handle everything from day-to-day stresses to long-term anxiety. And by using the process of training your brain to develop these coping mechanisms, you can build up your own internal strength. And like training your muscles, it takes determination and practice until it becomes a habit. And once you develop this habit, it becomes your personality, and in turn, it becomes your life. So I really hope this video helped you, and if you would like to learn more about how I help high achievers overcome self-criticism and anxiety to excel their mental and physical health, book a free strategy call with me using the link below.